ricotta that I made the other day. Some of you were here, some of you weren't.
Are you tuning in?
And the ricotta is a really simple process of simply soaking almonds. And some of you helped me do that. We soak the almonds. You want to start with blanched almonds because you don't want to have, you want to have pure white, fluffy looking ricotta like this. You don't want to have brown specks. So if you can buy slivered blanched almonds, you can just start with that. And all you have to do is soak it in water for 12 hours or so. And then process it in the blender. A Vitamix or a Blendtec is ideal, with about equal amount of water. And that produces an instant ricotta that's light and fluffy. It doesn't have the gravity of tofu ricotta, which is a little bit heavier. So this is a really light, fluffy ricotta that you can make. So we made this the other day, and what we did was we just had all natural almonds, so they had skins on them. And so we soaked them in water for about 24 hours. And what that does is that it absorbs the water and the skins become really easy to remove, and you can just kind of slip them right off. So several of us spent about half an hour or so removing the skins off of the almonds. And we made some ricotta, and we're using some today. We also used it in the apricot tart that I made that night. Do you remember that? There was some of that ricotta used on the bottom of the tart as well too. So what I did was I made the ricotta, and then I simply flavored it with a little bit of sea salt, little bit of garlic, and a little bit of fresh basil, which I just tore up. And you do not want to freeze this ricotta. It changes the texture. So you want to keep it fresh and use it within a few days. And these are these beautiful blossoms that Renata picked this morning from her garden. Yay! Yeah. And yeah, it's really simple. So they, Gretchen and Renata already filled most of the blossoms that she picked. If you fill these, if you pick them in the morning, the flowers are open, and that's the easiest time to fill them. And you can fill them a few hours ahead of time, so it's a great thing. If you pick them in the morning when they're still open and stuff them, it's a lot easier. In the evening, they close like this, and that's okay. You know, there are both male and female flowers. And so the male, I believe it's the male that has the little thing inside here, just like Pompeii. Just like so they can be a little fussy when they're closed, and you can fill them a couple of different ways. You can just use a little spoon like that, or you can get a pastry tube and fill the pastry tube and then just squirt it in there. And that makes it a lot easier. If you don't have a pastry tube, you can just get a baggie and just cut the end off of the baggie, the corner off the baggie, and then just stuff it that way. So if you have to tear, you know, it's going to get dipped in a batter. So it doesn't, if you can't stuff it completely by leaving the flour intact, it's okay if you have to break it a little bit. So some people remove the little, yeah, and I don't. I just leave it in there. It's just not that big of a deal. And so you want to put about a teaspoon or two of this ricotta in there. Now, ricotta is very, very traditional, but you can think of all sorts of other ingredients that you can put in there too, like the mozzarella that we made the other day could also be put in here, and that'll melt. The other day I stuffed zucchini blossoms at home. I had kabocha pumpkin at home, and I had some fresh basil, so I steamed the kabocha and then I pureed it with some fresh basil, and I stuffed it with a pumpkin basil puree, and I fried that, and that was delicious. So you can think outside the box. Traditionally it's cheese, but you can definitely use all sorts of other fillings, but you want to keep it light. You don't want to put something heavy in here. You know, you don't want something with lots of nuts that weigh, unless you puree it with water and it's light and fluffy. You want something that's nice and light because it's a really light appetizer. So anyway, does anyone want to come up and try stuffing these? And I'm gonna make some more batter, or I'm gonna make not more batter. I'm gonna make some batter. So the batter you want to also make very, very light, and so you want to use some sort of white flour, and you're going to use about equal parts flour and either sparkling water or a pinch of baking soda and still water. You can also use white wine, or if you have some Prosecco or some champagne that you didn't finish and it's just lying around, you can use that as well too. I mean, I can't imagine that would happen in this crowd. Every bottle would be killed. But you know, if you have some lying around, you can do that. And the frizzante, basically the carbon helps to lighten up the dough, and you don't want a heavy one. So it's sort of like making tempura. You want to make it as light as possible, and you want to whisk it as little as possible, and that keeps it nice and light. So you want something that's lumpy like this. You see how there's still lumps in it? So that the batter barely sticks to the outside in order to get it as light as possible. And then you also want to make sure that your oil is really hot. And you can test that by just putting a little bit of oil in there and see how it rises to the surface. So nobody wants to stuff a zucchini blossom? I do. Serving it, you can just serve it. If you slice it in half, it's really beautiful because then you can see the inside of the blossom. Or you can serve it whole with just a sprinkling of salt. Or you can make a little bit of red bell pepper sauce. You can roast some red bell peppers and puree with a little bit of olive oil and garlic. Keep it really simple and just drizzle that on top. Or a little bit of, pomodoro sauce, or just a little crushed cherry tomato.
This is just
For a second before it rose, which means that the oil isn't quite hot enough.
Right up.
And then what you end up doing is getting a really heavy, oily dough. You don't want that. So you just want to test it, put a drop in, and see how quickly. So it's almost ready when it rises to the top. Now remember, you don't want to overcrowd the pan either. Never cover more than half the surface of the pan when you're frying. Otherwise the temperature of the oil drops and you're going to get a heavy, oily batter again. Yep. And you can hear sizzling, which is what you want.
We're helping Matt.
Oh, Matt.
We're giving him advice.
Oh, he loves it.
It's a very, very bad one.
That's okay. It doesn't matter because they don't need to be deep brown. They can just be nice and...
Squah, always driving somewhere.
Now there's a couple things up there to eat too. Here, let me just...